Welcome to the Will to Power podcast. I'm your host, Nick Vital. I'm here with Don Giovanni from Futurism Forever. But before we get into the conversation, please do me a favor, hit the like and subscribe button as well as the notification button. Really helps me out in the algorithm, helps you out, make sure that you know when my new shit comes out. So I'm here with Don Giovanni. Don, what the fuck is up?
Not too much, man. Monday night, drinking a little vino, taking it easy right now. But other than that, nothing too exciting. How about you?
Like I said, I'm excited for this conversation. I'm excited to learn more about the projects you have going on. I know you run a website called futurismforever.com. And I guess the first thing I wanted to ask is, are you from the future? And can you tell me what will happen?
No, I'm not from the future exactly. Futurism was an art movement, an avant-garde art movement from Italy in the early 20th century. The Futurist Manifesto was initially published in France in 1909, and it was most active, I guess, remained active as long as Marinetti lived. He died in 1945, I believe, around the end of World War II. So, it kind of covers that whole era of Italy. And it's a philosophy built around rejection of the past, just embracing the future, new technologies, new ways of living. Marinetti wanted to create a completely new kind of Italy, a new Italian. And he built his nationalism around that, around progress, around looking forward rather than romanticizing the past. You go to Italy and you see ruins from ancient Rome everywhere and old statues. And Marinetti felt that it was like holding Italians back, that they need to free themselves of the weight of the past and build a new Italy that would exceed the greatness of ancient Rome or the Renaissance or any of these older eras that tend to get all the attention. And it did go on to have a big influence on fascism in a lot of ways, but they're very different in a lot of ways also. So, how I got into futurism was I actually grew up as an anarchist, an individualist anarchist. And futurism was kind of my gateway drug into fascism. It's what I discovered first, because there are a lot of anarchistic elements in futurism, like destruction of the past and flooding the museums and tearing down old monuments and out with the old and with the new, which was attractive to me as an anarchist at that time. But I kind of heard that they were also associated with fascism, which kind of threw a curveball at me. So, because I had always considered fascism to be this ultra conservative, stiff, uptight kind of movement, but the futurists were not at all like that. So, if this was part of fascism, maybe fascism had been misrepresented to me. So, I started doing my homework and reading the history, reading more into the ideology, and it definitely did offer a new perspective and kind of made fascism more attractive to me as an anarchist at that time. It didn't all happen at once, but I eventually kind of dropped the my anarchist past and started to identify more with fascism. It was really important in my political development. Futurism was. So that's why I started Futurism Forever, because I think the movement in 2022 is entirely too focused on trad life and traditionalism and the American founding fathers and all this and what they wanted America to be. I think we should embrace a new concept of America, or I'm Canadian, so a new Canada. And we need to let go of our past and build a new country that exceeds the greatness of what once was. We need to be revolutionary, not reactionary. We need to be radical. We need to be open-minded to new ideas. As much as I like fascism, like we can't recreate a movement from 100 years ago from a different country. Like, yeah, we need to make something that's relevant to the here and now, where we're actually at, and build toward a better future.
That's one thing I always tell kind of Nat Socks and kind of Fash peoples is those movements were very new for their time. You know, they weren't LARPing about something in the past. At that time, they were creating something new. Whereas today, the people who kind of identify with it are just online LARPers.
Yeah. But it amounts to historical revisionism, and it's like, how much relevance does this have in like most people's day-to-day lives? They don't care about like Italian history from 100 years ago or German history from 100 years ago. These movements resonated with those populations because they spoke to, you know, the struggles that people were going through at that time, and you know. Yeah, you have to make politics relevant to people's lives in the here and now. And like, what are their concerns? You know, do most white people want a white ethno state or whatever? Is that just something you want? You're trying to like force it on people and like they're getting frustrated. Like, I think it's very like fringe and subcultural. Like most people don't think in those terms, but.
You know, I completely agree with everything you've said so far, and actually, like the way I planned to take this interview was totally different because I was kind of interested in kind of futurism because I don't know a whole lot about that, but from what you've said so far, I agree with a lot of it. But let me backtrack just a little bit, just so I can cover some of that because I'm interested in that as well. So futurism is kind of like this kind of very multifaceted movement.
Yeah. Go ahead. You were breaking up there a little bit, so I didn't hear all of that.
I said that futurism is this very multifaceted movement that encompasses art, politics, culture, philosophy, and how did it kind of reflect itself in those areas? Like, what did futurism mean for politics, for art, for philosophy? You know, what did it stand for?
Well, it started out as more of a literary movement, actually. Like Marinetti himself was a poet. He wasn't like much of a painter. Visual artists and like people like Umberto Boccioni came later on, and it kind of invaded the art world. I guess the art could be the main takeaway is they wanted to portray like speed and motion on the canvas. Like they didn't want things to be like static, and it's not a very like futurist art is not very like serene or calming. It's very action oriented. You know, there's motion on the canvas. Everything is moving fast. Everything's up to 100. Yeah, it's very like masculine and aggressive, and yeah, it definitely like makes its impression. They got into theater and stuff, and their like theater performances were, from what I've read, very like wild affairs. Like fights would break out in the audience. They were trying to be provocative, and like it was kind of like punk rock or something at the time. Like riots would break out, cops would show up. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. But like, yeah, provocation was a big part of it, and yeah, like he has this one essay, or like more of a manifesto, really, called "The Pleasure of Being Booed," which is kind of like the manifesto. They weren't really concerned with popular tastes or trends. There was also like an elitist aspect to it. You know, they were speaking to like the real people who like understood what they were trying to do. They weren't out to like be popular or whatever. In like a mainstream, like populist sense. So like I do think there was like an elitist aspect to it too. They did want to influence culture, but they wanted to influence it their own way. It kind of evolved into a political movement after World War I. Marinetti started having more like political ideas. Before that, he was mostly talking about art and culture. And it kind of like just evolved naturally over time. He did start like a political party, and it ended up getting absorbed into the Fascio di Combattimento. And him and Mussolini both definitely wanted Italy involved in World War One. They thought it was important to build Italy up as a nation. Like they saw progress coming out of World War One for Italy. So that's kind of why they gravitated towards each other and went in the same direction. They both had kind of burnt bridges with the left at that time. They both kind of have a background that's more from the left than like the right or conservatism or what have you. So that's kind of like how they got on the same page. World War One was like the uniting factor between the futurists and the fascists. A lot of like futurist ideas kind of got sidetracked when real politics became an issue. And Mussolini did make a lot of compromises with like the bourgeoisie, the church, the monarchy, things like that. People who ended up stabbing him in the back in the end. But
yeah,
and like Marinetti was always kind of critical of that. He thought Mussolini was making too many compromises. A lot of the early figures felt that way. But it's probably like, I'm kind of always willing to give Mussolini the benefit of the doubt. That was probably just real politics. There were other like power blocks that existed in Italy that, you know, you kind of had to meet halfway with or make compromises with. It's just real politics. But Marinetti was definitely like an idealist, and he had his ideals, and yeah, he didn't want to compromise with anyone. And I kind of respect that too, you know. Mussolini was a pragmatist, but you need dreamers and like people who are forward thinking, and you know, people coming up with radical ideas. Like, you know, you also need politicians who are able to make those ideas palatable to people. So like it is kind of limiting in a lot of ways, futurism, but for me, it's very inspiring.
Interesting.
So I kind of think his philosophy is timeless too, and it's just as relevant to like realities today, just as relevant as it was then, because time is always marching forward. Like, and we can never go back to earlier times. Like, you know, we got to play the ball with lies and keep moving. But
I 100% agree with you. I'm really very critical of kind of trad cons and paleo cons. I find them all to be mostly LARPers for the most part. But that's a different topic. But that does kind of bring me to where I want to come now. And how do your politics kind of apply to today? Or how, I mean, given your beliefs, kind of futurism and your own kind of definition of what sounds like fascism, how does that sort of apply to politics today? Like, how do you interpret politics today? And what can we learn from your set of ideas, which seems to be very unorthodox in the right today?
Yeah, that's kind of a complicated question. I have been in like fascist circles for like about 5, 6, maybe like 7 years. So a few years now, but like what got me into those circles is very different than a lot of other people. Like a lot of people, it's like race tensions or, you know, LGBTQ being pushed through a little too aggressively. They kind of become reactionaries and like get into the movement that way. And so they bring a lot of conservative elements in with them. And like you said earlier, fascism, like the original movement, was not like trying to go back to an earlier model or like revive something from 100 years earlier. They were trying to build a completely new kind of country, a new kind of nation, a new kind of people. And they were very revolutionary, at least ideologically. So I don't really fit in with like the fascist community in 2022 in North America. I think like Futurism Forever attracts people on the fringes of that movement. Probably like more radical types, to be honest. Not radical in terms of like we're gonna shoot up a mosque or something retarded like that, which I disavow those kind of antisocial actions. I don't think it accomplishes anything. I do think like futurism is still very relevant to the movement today. And with Futurism Forever, I hope to change some minds and get the movement going in a more revolutionary direction, a less reactionary one, a less traditionalist one, a more progressive one. I guess like I take a more progressive approach to third positionism, or I don't really like that term. I like fascism.
I'm not a huge fan of either of those terms, quite honestly. But so a lot of the people that I have interviewed have kind of drifted over from the left towards the right, and I'm kind of curious about what led your drift that direction.
Initially, it was futurism. Like I grew up as an anarchist, and I was an anarchist for like 15 years. I was like an individualist, post-left anarchist. So I wasn't like a communal anarchist or something like that. It was very much like an individualist thing. And yeah, I liked people like Renzo Novatore, Bruno Filippi. I was always kind of into Italian culture and Italian identity, but I hated like leftist identity politics. I was very critical of that, especially like the LGBTQ stuff. Whatever the acronym is, they keep adding on to it. I don't even know what the plus means, but I was very critical of that. I was critical of like the tactics they use, like doing marches and shit like that. I didn't think it accomplished anything. So like I never really fit in on the left either. I was like very critical of it in a lot of ways, as I'm critical of the right now, or whatever we're calling it, dissident right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's what I was going to ask you next is kind of what are some of your critiques of people on the far right?
I think there's way too much emphasis on racialism, which to me, America and Canada both are like multi-racial countries. I've kind of just to accept that. Like I grew up in Toronto, which is a very multi-racial city. So like I'm used to like being around other ethnic groups. It doesn't really bother me. Like I'm kind of just used to it. Some of them are better than others. I don't think like America is ever going to be like white again. So I think it's just a non-starter. I don't think the sneaky Nazi tactic works either. Like presenting yourselves as like civic nationalists or something, but behind closed doors, you're all very racist. Like I think that people can see through that sort of thing, unless you're like doing a really good job of keeping it.
Most people aren't smart enough to do a good job. You can top secret either. I 100% agree, and I think it's one of those things where you can't choose the terrain, right? You're kind of you got the terrain, you got the social terrain. You can either make do with it and try to use it to your advantage, or you can cope and whine about it and talk about fantasies like an ethno state and wait for like some millenarian crisis where 100% of whites magically come to your side. It's a huge cope, and it's almost like a quasi-religious idea. And I'm glad to hear that you've kind of taken a somewhat of a stand against that. And I mean, futurism is a very, very distinct philosophy from conservatism. And why do you think it's important that people look towards futurism and not conservatism?
Because I think we need a vision of where we want to be in 20 years and 50 years and 100 years. If we're looking in the rearview mirror, we're probably not going to make it very far. Like, I don't have a lot of use for like nostalgia for the past, or like the 1950s fetishism that goes on. It's just like, it seems very useless to me. Like optically it can be good, but it can like, some people are into that sort of thing. I'm not. I would rather attract people who are like revolutionary minded, who want to build a new kind of society, who like have ambitions in that direction. I don't pretend like I know exactly what that's going to look like, but I think like I think if you're looking backwards, it's because you don't have a vision of where you want to be in 20 years. I think we should be like setting realistic goals for ourselves that like we can actually accomplish and just be moving forward. Trying to do things that are actually going to do positive things for our community, our nation, our people, and, set realistic goals for ourselves. We should be idealistic and, revolutionary too, but we should be moving forward, not obsessing over the past. I apply that even to eras that I like, we can't go back to fascist Italy. It's not even like it was relevant to Italy at that time. I don't even think it could be recreated in Italy today. And they have groups like Casa Pound that are not just LARPing as Italian fascists from 100 years ago. And they do actually do community engagement and put in work for their communities, and they're building a political movement. They're not just doing protests or rallies or whatever. I think they are actually trying to have a positive influence on the cities that they work in and the communities they work in. I think they're a positive group. To me, Casa Pound are the model for what a 21st century fascist group should look like.
What do they do?
They do a lot of food drives, charity work. They do housing initiatives, stuff like that, free healthcare, medical checkups, stuff like that. They definitely do rallies and stuff like that too. And, they used to exist as they ran in elections, but I think they've kind of given up on existing in that capacity because fascism has no real, what's the word? It's electorally insignificant. It is fringe and subcultural. I would say the same about people on the left who are communists or whatever. People are not going to vote for that kind of thing. So it's
I personally think you need to be more optically conscious in that and just drop the word entirely, not even trying to rehabilitate it in the realm of public opinion. Just kind of figure out a new term that's a little bit.
I do think we should be trying to devise a new ideology that makes sense for us in the here and now. I haven't dropped the term yet because I still don't have another term that's a better fit for me. But I do take a lot from Italian fascism, but I haven't deluded myself into thinking that Canada is going to become an Italian fascist state. That would be ridiculous.
You did mention kind of realistic policies, and what are some of those realistic policies that you'd like to see Canada implement, if possible, in the next year?
I guess I would like to see bridges being built between communities that exist here. For Canada, we don't really have a coherent national identity. We have French Canadians, we have Anglo Canadians who have never really gotten along. We have a lot of regional divides. People out west don't really, they think people out on the East Coast are too liberal or progressive or whatever. They're more conservative. So you have separatist movements popping up in Alberta and shit like that. I think we need a real coherent national identity that we should be working towards. Figure out ways to build bridges between all these communities, get them working towards shared national goals, and then
a new kind of shared national identity, I assume.
Not one based on being part of the British Commonwealth. I'm very critical of the whole Kanzuk thing, or I don't think Britain has the capacity to maintain an empire anymore. I don't think people in Australia and people in Canada really have the same issues they're dealing with. It's let's just have a decent Canada that we can build up, and we have the infrastructure to do so. We just don't have I don't know. It's a big country, so. But I think that's what needs to happen. We need to establish a national identity in Canada. With Futurism Forever, I don't really get into real politics, though. We mostly talk about art. Like, yeah, I don't pretend to know solutions to these problems. Ideally, like, yeah, we would be working towards shared national goals, though. Try and get people on the same page. And yeah, like, I think, like, the idea of French Canadians and English speaking Canadians sharing one identity is kind of hopeful thinking. I think there are deep rooted resentments that exist there, but I think that is what's going to have to happen. Like, as a Canadian nationalist, or a nationalist that exists in Canada, I wouldn't say like I'm a Canadian patriot. Like, I'd say I want like a new kind of Canada that, you know, doesn't exist yet. But yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, I think like my views on America are more or less the same. I just feel less comfortable talking about America because, like, I'm not American. So
I'm kind of the same way. I mean, I have a pretty worked out analysis of like kind of general political economy that I think applies worldwide. But at the same time, I'm not very comfortable speaking about like the cultural, social, political issues of places like Eastern Europe, things like that. You know, even Britain and places like that. I feel much more comfortable talking about the U.S.
yeah.
So let's switch gears just a little bit. And you had mentioned earlier about elitism and kind of how that plays into kind of like the politics that you've studied, local movements you've studied. And I'm kind of curious what you think of this notion of elitism in political activism, political leadership, or just in life in general, as a somewhat positive thing, right? Because often these are this word elite is used in a negative way, but it also definitely has a positive sense in these sort of right-wing movements. So can you elucidate that a bit?
Yeah, I think like I'm not talking about elitism in like a classist sense where like we should all bow down to the bourgeoisie and like, you know, just be slaves. It's more of like a spiritual aristocracy or a spiritual elite that I'm talking about. Like a revolutionary vanguard, I guess. I like the vanguardist approach to politics. And yeah, I'd like to see something like that kind of develop in America. And yeah, I think like how you manifest that is just being very sure of what you want, and like I said earlier, establishing realistic goals for yourself. Like, this is what we want to accomplish as a group within 20 years, and how do we actualize that and include people who are on the same page as you. Like, a certain amount of ideological purity is kind of, you can't be all things to all people. And like, I think a group that is very sure of what it wants, that's not like wishy-washy or vague, will attract people, you know, if it resonates with people. But like, populism should come later, like how to get people on the page with it. I think right now we need like radical ideas and like people who are thinking outside of the box, people who are not too attached to older eras. No, I'm not even talking just about like Italian fascism or whatever. Like, we can't go back to 1950s America either, or like 1776. It's just like, historical examples can be good for like use examples that people know to kind of get them paying attention. But like, the goal should be to open their mind up and to get them moving in a new direction. So yeah, what was the question again? Sorry,
Well,
it's like
no worries. No, that's great. That's great. Well, I want to ask you about two things. The first one was, you mentioned kind of like the vanguard and how important that was. And I totally agree. I'm actually getting ready to post this week an article called "The Masses in the Vanguard." And kind of, you know, my own background was I was kind of a Maoist, essentially. So I've read, you know, the communist canon effectively, and that was a long time ago. But for the people who are listening who might be kind of paleo cons or just kind of normie right, or just fucking clueless, because you know how the right can be. Can you explain to them what is a vanguard, and what is the application in a right-wing setting, right-wing movement setting? So what is the significance of a vanguard for the right?
Okay, so like a revolutionary vanguard will have like a revolutionary program that they're offering to people. They're going to lead the masses towards this revolutionary ideal. It comes from like the party though. Like it's not like they're not appealing to the masses exactly. Like they're making the masses come towards them and become revolutionary rather than like pandering to popular tastes or what have you.
Yeah. In the kind of Leninist terminology, it's like they don't tail the masses, they lead the masses, sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that's like we need something like that.
Interesting. And sounds like we agree a lot. It sounds like we would have a good conversation kind of off air where we could kind of like actually talk about strategy in a little bit more candid way. But in any case, let's kind of continue on. I'm kind of curious. You said you sound like you have an interest. Oh, the other question I wanted to ask. Okay, sorry, I got to ask this because you mentioned this other keyword that I thought was really interesting, and that was spiritual hierarchy. So can you explain what that is?
I guess like finding people who are on the same spiritual wavelength as you, people who share your ideals, your goals, your philosophy, and organizing them in an effective way, like trying to put together like a program that's going to resonate with people, that is going to get them out of the stupor they're in now, inspire them to do great things again. That's kind of why I put the emphasis on art at this stage and culture and not on like hard politics. Because like I want to inspire people to something better than we have now, or something new, something different than what has existed before. Like I said, I don't pretend I know exactly what that looks like, but I'm trying to find like-minded people who I can bounce ideas around with. And, in 10 years, I assume I'll be doing something completely different from what I'm doing now. But like the kind of groups that I want to see happening just do not exist in America or Canada, especially Canada. So like, I mean, it's not that I'm opposed to doing things in real life. It's just there's nothing that I really deem worthy of my time right now. So I guess like when I said spiritual hierarchy, I'm just like looking for like-minded people, and I'm like using my art channel to do that. At this stage, we don't get that. Like we clearly have political ideas, and we're all political people, but we don't exist as a political group, or I don't pretend what we're doing at this stage is activism. We'll see where it goes or what it manifests into. I don't think we're just going to be doing futurist readings forever, but it's a starting off point.
And before you even do activism, you kind of have to have a little bit of the zeitgeist out there. Like if nobody ever has heard of futurism, then you're going to find it very difficult to link up with people in real life and kind of do that.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It doesn't exist in the lexicon of like most American nationalists or Canadian nationalists right now. So, like I said earlier, there's so much like pandering to traditionalism in the past and 1776 and the founding fathers and all this in American nationalist circles. I think we need more talk about like revolutionary ideas and new ideas.
I agree.
Like I wouldn't define myself as a Duganist because I haven't read enough by him, but I basically agree with his analysis in the Fourth Political Theory. There were three main political trends of the 20th century. There was like liberalism, fascism, and communism. Communism and fascism both failed to take out liberalism. So now we need a synthesis and like a new idea. I don't necessarily agree with where he goes with it. I wouldn't call myself a Eurasianist. I really don't know that much about it. The only thing I've read by him is the Fourth Political Theory, but I agree with his analysis in that book. And like I would apply it to where we want to go. I'm not one of these guys who's like looking to Russia to save us or something. I'm not a Eurasianist or like a Russophile. I'm much more locally focused, but we need like an organic antidote to liberalism for the West that's distinctly for us. And yeah, I think like that's kind of where we need to be going. I do take some influence from Dugin, and the Fourth Political Theory, as it's laid out in the book, The Fourth Political Theory. But
I haven't read it. I'm extremely poorly read in kind of like esoteric, weird, niche right-wing things, except for BAP. But in any case, you mentioned like the kind of groups that you want to see don't exist. So what kind of groups and projects would you like to see?
Like I said, I think Casa Pounder have laid out the best example of what a 21st century fascist group should look like. And like, yeah, they definitely pay homage to their heroes and stuff and like the original fascist movement, but they're not just recreating it. They're not dressing up in costumes and, you know, marching around doing Roman salutes with bad optics and shit like that. They'll do Roman salutes, but, you know, it always looks good. It doesn't look like trashy, like it did in Charlottesville when people are doing Roman salutes. It just seems out of place and like they're just trying to be provocative or edgy or something. Like I don't see a lot of value in that. Like people interpret it differently in like the US than they're going to interpret it in Italy, right? Like it's a different culture. It has a different meaning here than it has there. But yeah, we need to do something that's unique to us and like is organic and authentic to us. I think that starts with actually connecting with in real life communities, getting this thing offline, doing like real activist work, you know, not just doing historical revisionism on the internet. No, I'm not saying I'm above it because it's basically what I'm doing at this point. But
what do you think of the trucker thing going on right now?
I think it's a good example of populism. People are fed up with the COVID restrictions. They want to be able to live normal lives again and not have to wear a mask every time they go out in public. I think we're all sick of the restrictions. I do think that's like a spontaneous, expression of the public will. It kind of reminds me a bit of like the Yellow Vest protests that were happening in France a couple years ago. Yeah, I don't think they have like a coherent, like, I wouldn't say they're like really revolutionary. I'd say they're just fed up and it's an honest expression of where the public is at right now. It's been 2 years and we're all sick of this shit, right? So.
Well, I think it shows the kind of power of civil disobedience sometimes, because it's putting Trudeau on the run. It's kind of grinded Ottawa to a halt.
My main criticism would be like I don't see like an ideologue or like I don't like see a list of demands of things they want. They're just like fed up.
Certainly, yeah. Well,
they want an end to the restrictions so they can move around more freely again, which I totally get and like I'm sympathetic to that. But yeah, I think like a lot more could be done with that momentum than I see being done right now. You know, they're definitely making a statement and it's powerful, but it remains to be seen where they go with it. I'm hoping it like snowballs into something that is like a real revolutionary threat to the establishment, but without that revolutionary vanguard like spearheading it, I think it's probably just going to fizzle out or be dismantled like through the force of the state eventually. We'll see what happens though. I'm definitely sympathetic, but I'm definitely going to be paying attention to what it develops into.
Most certainly. Hopefully, well, I mean, it could easily compound, right? Like 2 weeks of people jamming up Ottawa could be a big deal for Canada. If it does stretch on that long. Who knows? If it does stretch on for 2 weeks, I would be pretty surprised, but I think that could be a pretty significant thing. But let's continue on. Now you've mentioned that F word, and I wanted to kind of, quite honestly, steer clear of that because I don't usually go in that direction. But I just wanted to make sure for the audience. Now you're not into like putting people in concentration camps, I assume. Hopefully.
No. When I talk about fascism, I'm talking about the Italian kind. I don't particularly like Germanic National Socialism. I don't build my idea of nationalism around like one race. I think there are countries that can do that. I think Italy should be Italian. I think Germany should be German, but we don't live in those kind of countries. I'm not like too attached on the past or what the founding fathers wanted. I mean, the social reality that we live in is what it is. And like I said, I don't really have a problem with people from other races. I'm referring to like Gentile's philosophy specifically. Like it resonates with me. I think like a lot of his ideas can be applied to other countries, and but yeah, like I wouldn't like try and institute the policies of Italian fascism in Canada. I'm very critical of Mussolini too, right? Like I do not agree with the alliance with Hitler. I think it was the biggest mistake he ever made. Yeah, I'm not like an NS guy. I don't do Jewish conspiracy theories or things like that. It just doesn't interest me. I would rather criticize behaviors and ideas and not like people groups. I think a lot of people get like led down the wrong path when they start getting into the JQ and like shit like that. It tends to be the NS guys who like push that more so than other groups of people. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a problem with Jews in general. I do have a problem with bankers and predatory loans and stuff like that. That's what I would attack. I would not attack like the Jews. Because it's not just Jews who runs these institutions. They might be like disproportionately represented, but like you're letting a lot of evil people off the hook and putting the heat on a lot of innocent people who don't really have any power just because of their like ethnic group. I just don't think that's right. I think it's counterproductive. I think it steers people into a dead end where they're fighting the wrong enemy. The enemy should be neoliberal capitalism, in my opinion, not specific people groups.
I totally agree. So in terms of that F word, what would that look like in terms of like public policy? What does that mean in terms of government and economy and things like that? And how is it different than say what we have now?
It would be a central state, not like a central organized economy built around corporate states, as opposed to like free market economics. Definitely put a leash on like big businesses like Amazon being able to like have monopolies over like the entire economy, Google and shit like that. Put the leash on them, make sure they're not like subverting the nation for their own like private interests. Yeah, just make sure policies are being put forth that actually benefit the nation.
Now you say benefit the nation. What does that mean to you? Like, what sort of values do you do you think are represented in when you say bettering the nation?
A strong nation is a coherent nation, a nation that's actually built around shared values that people share. I don't think that really exists in America. Like they have vague ideas of freedom and stuff like that, but it's like a lot of that is just like poetic jargon or something. Like it makes people feel good. It doesn't have any tangible worth to me.
Yeah, I don't think it resonates with a lot of people in the U.S. anymore. I think it's kind of like this. It's kind of thing that resonates with maybe Gen Z and Boomers, but I don't think freedom in the founding fathers kind of resonates with too many people anymore, especially in the U.S. And I don't even know who the founding fathers of Canada are. No offense, but Yeah,
Yeah,
that conservatism kind of goes nowhere.
yeah. All they can do is like defend the status quo. Really, they're trying to conserve what already is. I know like that hasn't always been what conservatism is, but like, I mean, they've lost. Like, conservatism is just like it's a dead end by design. Like,
Almost
all they
certainly.
all they can do is react to the left. By definition, they're trying to conserve the present, the status quo. I know there are ideas beyond that in conservatism, but in general, this is like what conservatives are. They're opposed to gay marriage or whatever, but after that passes and it becomes law, they're very law and order focused people. So, they're never going to push back on that again. It just goes out the window.
I've described it as thus, like, the kind of the actual positions that conservatives take, they're never consistent throughout time and history, right? They're always changing. The only consistent thing about the positions that conservatives take are they're the losing positions, right? They're the positions on the back foot and on the defensive that they inevitably have to give up at some point and then kind of retake a slightly different position. So conservatives have never held a consistent actual position on anything, but again, just always the losing side.
Yeah, I mean, initially they wanted to defend the church and the monarchy and all that. Monarchism died basically, so now they want to defend, I don't know, like capitalism and free markets and Israel, to be honest. I guess like things like the family, stuff like that, which Marinetti thought that the family should be like phased out and replaced with free love and children raised in state institutions. So like those kind of conservative positions would not be like the futurist position. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with Marinetti's take on that, but
Interesting.
I do think that societies are evolving entities, and they're not static. Like, they should be living and breathing and evolving and growing, and aspects of society that are not able to adapt to those changes are just going to die because they're weak and probably dying anyways. Strong peoples are able to change with the times, or or actually be a motivating factor in changing the times to something that's like beneficial to them and their group. So, yeah, like
nice, man. Yeah, I 100%.
I think they stall human progress, because like they're not forward thinking people. They just want to hold on to the past, defend the status quo, respect for law and order, which if you're a dissident, you shouldn't respect law and order. You should be revolutionary, and it doesn't mean you have to be antisocial or not care about people, but you are fighting like the status quo, the system. You're a dissident because you don't like the status quo. So I don't know. There were like the revolutionary conservatives in Germany. Me and like CSD, we get along, we're buddies, but we do kind of butt heads on this because he does identify as a conservative. He's been on your podcast before. Yeah, just in case people don't know who I'm talking about. He's on FF podcast a lot too. He runs Syndicalist Paper blogs, the Syndicalist Paper blog. He's a good guy, but yeah, we kind of have debates on conservatism versus progressivism a lot. And yeah, like he always counter signals me, but like there have been revolutionary conservatives. What about like Oswald Spengler, Ernst Jünger, those kind of guys that he's into? What about Dugan? Like, he likes those kind of guys, and he's read a lot more into them than I have. It's not really my background. I never went through a conservative phase. So to more like seasoned conservatives, I'm sure they're going to have all kinds of complaints about how I'm framing conservatism. There are different strains of conservatism. They're not all neocons, but when most people hear conservatives, conservatism, that's what they're thinking about, and that's kind of what I'm criticizing.
I'm thinking more of like the kind of new Zoomer paleocon.
Yeah, like the Nick Fuentes is like, I don't see a lot of value in that. They're just trying to return to the 1950s and shit. Like,
I find it ironic that most of them are like 20-year-old guys who feel lucky if they have a girlfriend, LARPing about what the family is. Most of them, like I said, feel lucky if they get a girlfriend. In any case, let's move on. Now, towards the end, I do something called the cancel ground, where I ask you a few questions. In 5 years, possibly you get canceled because of your answers. So the first question is, the Misfits, better with Danzig or Michael Graves?
Definitely Danzig. He was a great vocalist and a great frontman. Despite I've heard he's a bit of an asshole in real life and shit, but like, I don't care. His music was great.
He's kind of a too, right? His songs were actually kind of poetic in a way.
Yeah, like musically, like his vocal wise, he reminds me a lot of Jim Morrison. He's got like this deep baritone voice. There's kind of like an early rock and roll 50s vibe to the Misfits. It's kind of campy, but great at the same time. Yeah. I'm a big Misfits fan. So
yeah, me too. A little bit rockabilly sounding. All right. Yeah. Next question. Stalin, based or not, specifically for ice picking Trotsky?
Well, Stalin cracked down on the Russian Futurists, so I kind of respect him from a pragmatic point of view. Like he didn't come from money. He was a bank robber and shit back in the day. He became like the leader of, the Soviet Union, but I disagree with a lot of his policies. Frankly, I think he was too conservative. I think he was a little paranoid too. He basically like offed anybody who criticized Stalin, which I don't think is a good thing. I think like people should be like, I'm not an authoritarian like that. Like I think leaders should be open to criticism. I wouldn't go to the lengths he did, but I know a lot of people who admire him as like a strong leader. I guess I see that. Parts of me kind of admire him too, but yeah, I would say cringe. I don't agree with too many of his policies. So
gotcha. All right. For the record, are you in favor of the AI takeover or not?
No, I think technology is a tool that is meant to benefit humanity. And yeah, it should advance humanity forward, but humanity should still be at the steering wheel and should still be in control. I don't really like merging man with machine. Like in some contexts, I could see benefits to that. Like you could give sight to the blind with technology. Someone loses an arm for whatever reason, you can give them a mechanical arm. That's cool. The point in technology is to make people's lives better, not to replace them. Or I would never go full Luddite. I just don't see the appeal in that. But or full Ted Kaczynski. Like I don't agree with him at all on the technology question, but or AI question, but. Yeah, I think technology should benefit humanity. It's to make our lives better and easier, not to make us obsolete or meaningless or, to replace us or something. I wouldn't go that far. But
well, now Skynet will know where you stood. And all right, well, that's the cancel round. I do have a few other questions, man. So what sort of projects are you working on right now, or what should people look forward to with what you're doing?
We're going to continue the YouTube channel where we do podcasts. The podcasts are mostly like readings and like roundtable discussions where we talk about futurist texts and other texts that interest us. So, like we do cover other art movements like Dadaism, Surrealism. We do cover a lot of anarchist texts. Like we've done Armed Joy by Alfredo Bonanno. We're going to be doing the Black Mask, who are a really interesting like 1960s revolutionary avant-garde art group, I guess I would describe them as. They did a lot of like street theater protests. They're interesting because they like influenced the Weather Underground, who were like a really radical group, and they were apparently the only like white group that the Black Panthers actually respected because of their revolutionary agenda. They had a lot of ties with like the Situationists too. Not too many people have heard about them though, so like I'm looking forward to that one. We're doing that at like the end of the month, so watch out for that one.
I used to like get into like really esoteric kind of like left-wing groups like the Revolutionary Action Movement, which was a precursor to the Black Panther Party. But I had never heard of the Black Mask. And it's funny that you bring up that they influenced the Weather Underground, because I've met Bill Ayers and had dinner with Chesa Bodin, who is the other guy, the guy who's in prison, his son. I can't David Gilbert. It's David Gilbert's son, and now he's like the DA of San Francisco. And I have the Weather Underground manifesto signed by Bill Ayers.
That's crazy. You should definitely check that one out. Maybe we'll even be able to get you on, because like it sounds like you have some background. Yeah, like
I don't know too much about the anarchist stuff, but like I said, I knew a lot about like the kind of anti-imperialist, kind of more ICM focused 60s movements.
Anyway, aside from the YouTube channel, though, we did launch a blog in December, so we're going to be writing more original content. Also, like, people in our chat, like, contribute poems they wrote or artwork they did, stuff like that. Original writings, like, our critiques of the movement. Friends of ours, we ask if we can publish things they've written, stuff like that. So, yeah, we do have, like, a blog where we write original content. We're also planning on putting together like a zine, like a print zine for the end of the year. So
that's really cool. Yeah. Whenever I did left-wing activism, we had a print zine, and there's always, I like the format of that. It's just kind of like even if you see it as a PDF, it still looks really cool. So I do have kind of one kind of go ahead.
We want it to be like a print zine that like you can buy and like pick up, and it's like a physical thing. That everything on the internet is so temporal, so like we want to make like a real document that exists that you can hold in your hands. To make it more real, we want to give it like a punk Dada kind of like collage, copy and paste aesthetic. We're bouncing ideas around now. None of us have a background in this, so like I'm giving us the year to like figure out how to do it and like where we want to go with it. But we kind of have like the general idea of what we want to do. But if that's successful, we'll probably like get more into that. But that's something we want to get into. We're all pretty excited about that idea. So.
Cool, man. And before we wrap this up, is there anything you want to plug, or what's your website URL?
Futurismforever.com. And yeah, we're going to be working on building that up more. We're going to keep maintaining the YouTube channel. And yeah, we have a pretty good activity on Telegram and on Twitter. So Twitter at Futurism Forever. Just search for Futurism Forever. You can find us. And yeah, just keep doing what we've been doing and build on it in 2022. Find out what works, what doesn't. We're kind of figuring things out as we go along. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this year. We have a lot of good content planned. So
nice, man. Nice. And I noticed on last thing before we finish this up, do you have any music recommendations or any kind of nostalgic things? Anything that you're really getting into right now? What's your favorite thing right now in terms of music wise?
There's a punk band called Dollhouse that I like a lot. They're a good band. I guess I like I'm forgetting their name. I like Project Section Hate, sorry, they're a good band. I like them. I'm mostly into like punk and hardcore. I guess I like Sewer Slut. I'm into electronic music too. I think she's a tranny or some shit, but like I just like the music. I don't care about the other shit. It sounds good to me, so I like it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask originally for the canceled round if you liked the Queers or the Ramones better, but I didn't know if you kind of knew that sort of East Coast.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say the Ramones are better. The Queers are just like Ramones.
Okay.
The Queers are like Ramones worship, but like I love the Queers too. Love Songs for the Retarded is a great album.
That's such a good album. Oh, okay, yeah. That was a good album. Cool, man. All right, we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you so much for being on, and everybody should definitely check out Futurism Forever. Also, if you're still listening to this, make sure to subscribe, like, and we will catch you next time. Peace.